Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
The front page of the Times has got that fantastic photograph of Obama. Surprising. Well, I'm sure not the residents of number 10 Downing Street, but maybe the reporters outside when he arrived for that meeting yesterday with the Prime Minister. But the headline is Sunak risks losing key votes on the Rwanda bill, as we've just been talking about. They also have a story about fasting. They say it's linked to increased risk from heart attacks and strokes. Chat about that in a minute or so. The Daily Telegraph has Rachel Reeves. She's going to make a speech a little bit later on today. This is, of course, Labour's shadow chancellor. She's going to say that Britain faces a 1979 moment. Her argument today is that she will vow that a Labour government would work with business to create a decade of national renewal. Well, in the business news in about half an hour's time, we're going to look at sort of her pitch about how she wants to reform the Treasury. But there's also a photograph, and you may remember this one. It is a picture of Elizabeth II with some of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Now, that was taken by the Princess of Wales, and the allegations are that this picture too was edited at source. That's according to Getty Images. It's a brilliant photograph. As ever, everyone looks quite charming, smiling. You do think, well, it is brilliant to get all those children looking wonderfully sort of put together in one photograph. We'll look at those allegations as well. The Sun say, great to see you again, Kate. They've got what is a blurry image, a freeze frame from a video that was taken of Kate out yesterday for the first time in public that she's been seen since having that surgery in January. Will that end the conspiracy? I think that's unlikely. The Daily Mail says Harry and Meghan are downgraded by the palace. So there's lots of royal news about today. Joining me to go through the papers in more detail is Andrew Eborn, barrister, broadcaster, president of Octopus TV. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning. Always a joy to join you.
Shall we start with the royals? I mean,
yes.
The conspiracy online has been unbelievable. I mean, I can't, but people seem to think because I'm sort of remotely involved in news, I must have the inside scoop on what's happening with the royals. And I'm getting a very surprising number of texts from people saying, can you tell me what's going on? Like I've got sort of the inside voice of Kensington Palace. I mean, finally, the Sun is saying this is their royal world exclusive, this first photograph. She's been seen out and about. Do you think this is going to stop the conspiracy chatter?
Oh, of course not. I mean, people love to chatter about these things. And as you know, I do a regular series called Fake or Fact. And we looked at all the pictures which have been doctored over the years. I mean, Cecil Beaton was famous at making sure that pictures of royals were picture perfect. And I talked about the Wales monochrome Christmas card, you might remember from last year. If you look at that, basically they have the white rabbit fingers are missing on one of Louis's hands, and Kate's second foot is hidden and there are extra legs. I also spoke about the 10 children smiling, the 97th birthday of Queen Elizabeth. It's clearly doctored. The question here, however, is that there's no ill intent. To try and make a photo look as good as possible is not exactly showing people that she's jumping out of aeroplanes or going deep sea diving. So people love to have conspiracy theories, and they come about because there's a vacuum. When information is not shared, people come up with their own theories as to what's happening. And I think poor old Kate, she's been a victim of this, and I think we should leave her alone, quite frankly.
Do you think in hindsight, Andrew, that the palace should maybe have been more transparent about what was actually going on, which then wouldn't have created that vacuum?
Well, I like the old mantra which they used to have, never complain, never explain, and it served the royal family so very well for very long. It was Disraeli who originally came up with that. And the difficulty is now they're sharing so much information in this day of social media where basically we want to find out everything about them. And as soon as we don't share a bit of information, that's what happens. And Kate was just over the road from me at Regent's Park at the London Clinic. And also Charles was there at the same sort of time, and they had the press pack outside hanging on every possible word for some sort of information. I go back to what I say beforehand. She's a woman recovering from obviously very serious surgery, and we should let her be.
I guess the challenge is they don't want to add fuel to the conspiracy, and that's where things like edited photographs do more harm than they do help.
No, you're absolutely right. It was naive, let me put it that way, to put out an edited photo. The way that the press work, as you know, the media says you can't have manipulated photos. It's in the rules and regulations of these photo agencies. And that's why they put out this kill notice. but because the public don't necessarily understand or haven't had it explained to them what a kill notice means, you think, oh, it's fake news. There must be a terrible picture from somewhere else. It's on a Vogue magazine cover and all these other crazy conspiracy theories. It was basically a lady trying to make sure the photo looked as great as possible. And as you know, what happens, especially in fashion photos, they take several of these photos. Is the sort of click which they do, and they try and see Rosie's hair looks brilliant in this and her smile is even more charming in this. So they do a composite of lots of different shots to basically get the best one. And that's what happened here.
Which is fine if it's in a fashion magazine, but maybe not so if it's in a news article. I think that was the tension. We're going to talk a bit about potholes a little bit later on in the programme. But front page of the Telegraph is this story that councils are launching what they're describing as a new war on motorists as half of drivers face fines. Councils are applying for the right to be able to fine motorists if drivers get caught, let's say, in yellow boxes, make illegal U-turns or drive in a bus lane when it's not permitted. I kind of think, fair enough, Andrew.
Oh, it's totally fair enough. And actually, it's a slightly misleading headline because it's not actually new penalties that are being introduced. What it is where does the money go? And these cash-strapped councils basically will now be able to receive this money rather than going into the central pot. And that's the principle. They're talking about cars being wallets on wheels, if you like.
Yeah, that's the AA who said we were wallets on wheels when we're driving.
Exactly. So that's what's happening. It's a question about where will the money go? And I think the councils will be very, very grateful for that. What they're saying is that the funds recouped from these enforcement notices and money raised can only be used for certain purposes, such as recouping the costs of enforcement, obviously, but also paying for things like public transport and funding highway improvements, which a lot of people talk about when you talk about potholes and things like that. The councils need the money. Giving them an incentive to collect it is what this is really about.
Yes, and I guess the challenge is it's not good the money isn't going to the police. You'll find it's going to your local council instead.
Exactly.
We'll talk about driving in a little bit more detail. Fasting. We've heard about the Prime Minister's sort of dietary habits in the last sort of few months or so. Front page of the Times says diets where people eat only during an 8-hour daily window and fast for the rest of the day. Actually, you could be doing yourself some harm. The research is suggesting that has an increased risk of death from heart attacks and strokes. It's another story, Andrew, of when you think you're trying to do something to benefit yourself, but yet there are traps you may be falling into.
You're absolutely right, Rosie. What happens? You have one day you have this is the best thing for you ever, and the next day this is the worst thing for you ever. Celebrities such as Jennifer Aniston, Hugh Jackman, Kourtney Kardashian, I know you follow them all the time, Scarlett Johansson, they all go for this particular diet. And what happens is the idea is you eat for 8 hours and the rest of the time you fast because it gives your body time to recover. Now, what's happened is they did a study of about 20,000 adults, average age of 49, and they were tracked for 17 years, can you believe it? And they looked within that period, the 20,000, they worked out that 840 died of heart attacks and strokes. And basically those who were eating less than 8 hours a day, or only within those sort of 8 hours a day, had a 91% higher risk of death from these causes, according to the results. And that's quite shocking. More information is needed. And they do say, well, you've got to be slightly more cautious about these sort of diets.
Of course, yeah, cautious about the diets, and I think cautious about the research as well, because of course we can't infer cause and effect. And I think the volunteers that took part in the study were asked about their eating patterns on 2 days of the week, and then it was sort of assumed they followed the same schedule for years to come. I have not stuck to a diet myself for years. I think not even 1 year in total. So the idea that maybe you'd be doing it for 17, I think, is extremely complimentary to the volunteers taking part in the survey.
I think that's absolutely right. I have a seafood diet. Basically, I see food and I eat it.
I can imagine. The story in the Times, they were talking about this on Times Radio Breakfast yesterday, actually. That's not the way to treat Thatcher, the V&A has been told. Margaret Thatcher was listed as a contemporary villain at the museum.
Yes.
But in that list...
I went down there. Yeah.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, Osama bin Laden is on it. Should Margaret Thatcher be in that category?
Well, I'll tell you what it is, and it's a slightly misleading story. I did pop down to the V&A yesterday when the story broke, and I had a look at the exhibition. And it's all about comedy, and comedy, by its very nature, knocks those in power. And they have pictures of Queen Elizabeth, they have pictures of Tony Blair, they have Boris Johnson, and obviously, in amongst all that sort of stuff, they have Maggie Thatcher. And the point that they make in the Punch and Judy summary, which is basically from the 16th century Italian street performer, is where it all came from, is that they're knocking public figures, and they say over the years the evil character in this seaside puppet show has shifted from the devil to unpopular public figures, including Adolf Hitler, Margaret Thatcher, and Osama bin Laden, as contemporary villains. Now, it does seem unfortunate that whoever wrote that copy put Maggie together with Hitler and Osama bin Laden, but the intention behind it is to highlight how comedy works, and comedy works by knocking people in the public eye, and that's the story.
Yes, I mean, it was about sort of, who'd been villains then in the traditional Punch and Judy puppet show. Sir Connor Burns, a Conservative MP, was pretty cross about this. He said whoever wrote that caption should be called out publicly for being a moron, or perhaps more usefully sent to read a Ladybird book of modern world history.
That's the way to do it.
He said this is sadly symptomatic of the woke. Oh, you can imagine how the rest of that goes on. Let's not give it any more airtime. There are lots of photographs, and it's slightly hard to describe this, but the Banksy, the new Banksy mural, which is a tree that, of course, doesn't have any of its leaves on it, looks quite sort of brutalist. And Banksy has spray painted green paint onto the backing of kind of a wall where the tree's standing in front of it to make it look like it's full of foliage. It's proving pretty popular. Lots of people want to go and see it. You've been to the V&A for some research for the paper review. Andrew, will you go and visit the Banksy tree too?
Well, it's not too far from me. Absolutely. I'll go and climb the Banksy tree and maybe even make an offer for the place. So Alex Georgia, who's an estate agent who bought property in 2012 for $400,000, he says it's worth about $1.3 million now. But as a result of the Banksy being there, it's going to be worth considerably more. And he joked about putting up the rent and things like that. I think it's glorious. And Banksy apparently has come out and said, yes, it is. It's one of my works. What's interesting with these sort of works, though, Rosie, you might recall that last time a Banksy appeared, somebody came and took it off.
Oh, yes. That was the one with the fridge, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think this is a bit too big to take off the wall. But certainly,
well, we've had lots of stories about people chopping down trees recently, so you could try and take the tree and the wall with it.
I think that's a great idea. Yes, well, Jeremy, it's not about a good idea. We're going to absolutely discourage people from doing that. But even people like Jeremy Corbyn have got along to get their photo opportunity to say how proud and delighted they are.
Well, if it goes missing, Andrew, you're going to be suspect number one now, I have to say.
Soon twig, branch out into crime. Definitely not.
And we should do a pun-ometer in this paper review with Andrew every time he comes on and see how many he manages to filter in. Thank you so much,
The pun is mightier than the sword. It's going to be good. Lovely to see you, Rosie.
Thank you so much. Andrew Eborn, Barrister, broadcaster and president of Octopus TV.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.